Historic examples of glorified criminals. Throughout history, certain criminals have been transformed into folk heroes, admired not for their crimes, but for the way they challenged authority, displayed charisma, or appeared to fight for the common people. This glorification often blurs the line between right and wrong, making it important to understand why some criminals are remembered as heroes. Two of the most well-known examples are the legendary outlaw Robin Hood and various 20th century gangsters such as Al Capone and Bonnie and Clyde. Robin Hood, the heroic outlaw. Robin Hood is perhaps the most iconic example of a glorified criminal. A legendary English folk figure, he is portrayed as a noble outlaw who stole from the rich and gave to the poor. While there is debate over whether Robin Hood truly existed, his image has been deeply embedded in Western culture for centuries. The story paints him as a man who stood up to the corrupt rulers of his time, particularly Prince John and the Sheriff of Nottingham. Robin's criminal acts, such as robbery and defiance of law enforcement, are justified within the narrative as noble acts of resistance. His followers, known as the Merry Men, are similarly depicted as loyal comrades rather than common criminals. The glorification of Robin Hood reflects society's admiration for those who challenge injustice. Even though theft and violence are part of his legend, the fact that his motives seem selfless and moral allows audiences to overlook his crimes and embrace him as a symbol of justice. Gangsters of the 20th century, icons of rebellion. The 1920s and 1930s in the United States gave rise to a new kind of glorified criminal, the gangster. Figures like Al Capone, John Dillinger, and Bonnie and Clyde became household names. These individuals committed serious crimes, ranging from robbery and bootlegging to murder, yet many people during that time admired them. Al Capone, for instance, was one of the most powerful crime bosses in American history. He led a vast criminal empire during the Prohibition era, profiting enormously from illegal alcohol distribution. While Capone was ruthless and violent, he also donated to charities, ran soup kitchens, and presented himself as a man of the people. This helped build a complex public image, both feared and respected. Bonnie and Clyde, the infamous outlaw couple, were involved in numerous bank robberies and murders across several U.S. states. Yet photographs of them posing together with guns, along with romanticized newspaper reports, made them seem like rebellious lovers standing against a corrupt system during the Great Depression. Public sympathy grew for them, not necessarily because of their actions, but because they appeared defiant and glamorous in an otherwise bleak time. Why society glorifies criminals. There are several reasons why society tends to glorify certain criminals. One major factor is media portrayal. Films, books, and news reports often romanticize these figures, focusing on their charisma, wit, or supposed moral code rather than the harm they caused. Characters like Robin Hood and Al Capone have inspired countless movies that emphasize their charm and bravery over their criminality. Another reason is the human tendency to root for the underdog. When people feel oppressed or powerless, they may find comfort in stories of individuals who defy authority and beat the system. Criminals who seem to fight against corruption or inequality can be seen as modern-day rebels, even if their actions are illegal or violent. Conclusion. The glorification of criminals like Robin Hood and notorious gangsters shows how complex society's view of crime and morality can be. While these figures broke the law, they are remembered not just for their crimes, but for the way they captured the public imagination. Whether seen as symbols of justice or rebellion, their stories remind us that history is often shaped as much by perception as by fact. Anti-hero worship and distrust of authority. In many societies, especially those with histories of inequality or oppression, cultural values often lean toward glorifying the rebel or anti-hero, someone who defies the rules, challenges authority, and acts outside the boundaries of law or morality. This admiration is not accidental. It's deeply tied to the public's relationship with power and justice. The celebration of anti-heroes reflects a growing distrust of authority and a cultural yearning for individuals who seem to fight for the common person, even if through morally gray means. Who is an anti-hero? An anti-hero is not a traditional hero. They lack the noble qualities of courage, selflessness, and honor typically expected from a protagonist. Instead, anti-heroes are flawed individuals, rebellious, morally ambiguous, and often selfish, who still manage to win the audience's sympathy. They might steal, lie, or kill, yet they are seen as more relatable than conventional heroes because they reflect real human struggles and imperfections. Characters like Tony Montana, Scarface, Walter White, Breaking Bad, or even Joker in recent cinema portray individuals who operate outside the law but become cultural icons. Their popularity speaks volumes about how societies see justice, power, and personal freedom. The rise of anti-hero worship. Anti-hero worship stems partly from the belief that conventional systems, political, judicial, or social, have failed to deliver fairness. When the public feels betrayed by the institutions meant to protect them, they often start rooting for those who break the rules. The anti-hero becomes a symbol of rebellion, someone willing to do what others cannot or will not. For example, in societies where corruption is widespread and the law often favors the powerful, the anti-hero is seen as a truth-teller, a figure who exposes the hypocrisy of the system. Their actions, no matter how criminal, are interpreted as necessary for justice. In such cases, morality becomes flexible. What matters more is why the anti-hero breaks the law, not just the fact that they do. Distrust of authority, a cultural underpinning. Cultural values don't exist in a vacuum. They evolve in response to historical and social experiences. Wars, colonization, class oppression, police brutality, and government corruption all contribute to the erosion of public trust. When people no longer believe that authority figures act in their best interest, they begin to seek justice through alternative narratives. This distrust fuels the idea that those in power are more criminal than the actual criminals. Politicians lie, corporations exploit, and law enforcement often acts with impunity. In such a context, someone who robs a bank or defies a corrupt government is seen not as a villain, but as a revolutionary. For instance, in folk culture, figures like Robin Hood are celebrated for stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. Though technically a thief, Robin Hood is revered because he defies the unjust rulers and stands with the oppressed. Similarly, in some cultures, even local gangsters are seen as protectors of the neighborhood, especially when they provide jobs, help the needy, or maintain order in a way the state has failed to. Media's role in reinforcing these values. Television, film, music, and social media play a massive role in shaping how society views anti-heroes. Popular culture often glorifies characters who fight against the system, even if their methods are violent or criminal. Audiences are shown their backstories, vulnerabilities, and struggles, which makes them human and relatable. The line between right and wrong becomes blurred, and viewers are invited to empathize with lawbreakers. Even in music, especially in genres like rap, artists often narrate lives of crime not to glorify violence, but to highlight systemic poverty, racism, and survival. These stories, though raw, give voice to the oppressed and elevate the criminal into a misunderstood hero. Conclusion: anti-hero worship and distrust of authority are deeply intertwined cultural values that reflect a society's dissatisfaction with power structures. When traditional systems of justice fail to deliver, people look to those who challenge the status quo, even if they do so through unlawful means. As a result, the anti-hero becomes not just a character, but a symbol of resistance, freedom, and the struggle for a more just world. Impact on society and youth. When criminals are glorified or portrayed as heroes, whether in stories, movies, or the media, it can have a powerful and lasting impact on society, particularly on the youth. This glorification shapes mindsets, influences behavior, and sometimes distorts the difference between right and wrong. While such figures may appear exciting, rebellious, or admirable, their influence can carry both subtle and dangerous consequences. Distortion of morality. One of the most immediate effects of glorifying criminals is the confusion it creates about morality. When criminals are portrayed as clever, fearless, or even noble, their wrongdoings are often overshadowed by their charisma. This sends a mixed message. Breaking the law is acceptable, or even admirable if done with style or for a seemingly good cause. For young people, whose moral compass is still developing, this can lead to dangerous thinking. A teenager may begin to believe that achieving respect, wealth, or fame, even through illegal means, is more important than honesty, hard work, or empathy. The line between hero and criminal becomes blurry, and admiration for the wrong role models can grow. Inspiration for criminal behavior. While not every young person exposed to such content will act on it, repeated exposure to glorified criminal behavior can influence real-life choices. Some youth, especially those in difficult environments, poverty, broken homes, or crime-ridden areas, may begin to view the criminal lifestyle as a shortcut to success. They see criminals not as threats to society, but as survivors, providers, or leaders. This is particularly visible in how some gangsters, drug dealers, or hackers are idolized in music videos, films, or social media. When crime is seen as exciting, powerful, and free of consequences, it becomes attractive, especially to those who feel limited by the system. Erosion of trust in law and authority. Glorifying criminals often goes hand in hand with undermining the legitimacy of authority. If the law is constantly shown as corrupt, oppressive, or weak, people may stop trusting it altogether. For youth, this can result in a general disrespect for police, teachers, or even parents. Rather than seeking justice through lawful means, they may admire those who take matters into their own hands. This mindset can lead to increased violence, rebellious behavior, and a lack of respect for social rules and norms. Cultural and social division. In a broader sense, glorifying criminals can also deepen societal divisions. When some communities celebrate figures seen as criminals by others, it creates cultural conflict. What one group calls resistance, another may call crime. This can lead to misunderstanding, stereotyping, and tension between communities, especially when the media fails to present a balanced view. Conclusion. The glorification of criminals may seem harmless in fiction or entertainment, but its impact on society, especially on impressionable youth, can be serious. It reshapes values, influences behavior, and weakens the foundations of justice and morality. While it's important to tell complex stories and acknowledge the flaws in authority, society must also ensure that crime is never mistaken for courage, and that true role models are those who uplift others through positive actions.